I started there because for me, connection is the strongest aspect of resiliency. When we stay connected, we do better. And I'm doing all I can to encourage that for myself and for other people. And that's part of why I wanted to do this. Some people know me better than other people, so I want to tell you a little about why I do this work and what I do in my life in general before COVID. I am a grief counselor. I'm also a radio host of a show called Good Grief. I've been doing it for about 6.5 years. And the radio show / podcast, all of my interviews are available. And it's about how difficult times sometimes transform us in ways we don't expect. And so I bring that lens to this time, that we don't know exactly what's going to come out of this. There are people that study post-traumatic growth as opposed to post-traumatic stress disorder. It's much more common, and they've calculated that 60 to 90% of people who go through hard times end up identifying themselves as having grown. Doesn't take the trauma away. It's side by side. Let me tell you how I came to the work, which is that my first wife was living with cancer for 10 years. She was never well. She was sick the whole 10 years. And in 1995, she died. And I wasn't surprised by the things that hurt about that, but I was hugely surprised by the things that grew in me, how much more confident I became, how my spirituality deepened, how my relationships deepened, just everything in my life, in my personhood got better. So that's what I want to bring today. But with a certain aspect. When the election happened in 2016, I plunged. It was a grief event for me. Everyone in my family is in some way a marginalized person. And so, including, of course, myself as a lesbian. And so it really plunged me. And I started thinking about what it was going to take for me to stay well in the face of a difficult time. This is a different difficult time, but I find the same principles apply. I came to feel that what it was going to take was that I grieve, that I have the feelings, whatever they are at any given moment, that I find comfort and solace, that I find inspiration, and that I take action. So today I'm going to kind of take those one at a time, talk about them some, but hopefully offer some usable tools that you can take into what you're doing to cope with, what is a absolutely unprecedented event as far as I'm concerned. We've never been this connected as a world. We've never grieved this way as a global community to quite the degree. The feelings, some of them remind me of the 4 months before my wife died, where I didn't go out of the house. So that's my particular emotional resonance with this moment. And we all have our own. We're all very unique. One thing I want to say before I get started on those 4 areas is, if it is possible to not compare yourself to anyone else as we go through this, that will help a lot. I'm noticing with clients and friends and everybody, I'm hearing a lot of, well, there are people who have it much worse than I do. And so I feel a little embarrassed or, undeserving of the difficulty I'm having. It doesn't work that way. I know people in harder situations that have built up a resiliency that's helping them do better right now. I know people that have a lot of privilege that are really struggling. It doesn't add up. So I just want to encourage everybody to have the experience they're having and say yes to that. Another word about these 4 areas: timing is everything. If what you feel the need for is to have the feelings and then you try to take action instead, it tends to backfire. If it's time for action and you plunge into feeling, it tends to backfire. Any one of them, if it's not at the right moment for you, may make things a little bit harder. So it's a good moment to get to know ourselves in terms of what we need at any given moment, and nobody in the world can tell you that. You're the only one who can know that. Okay, so starting with grief and feeling the feelings, because it's something I had to learn how to do in that period where my wife was ill. And I'm noticing that what's happening for a lot of people is extreme anxiety. Anxiety is a constellation of physical reactions that come out of fear. It also can be a cover for other feelings, but I think in this circumstance, we have every reason in the world to be anxious. There's an actual threat, either to us personally, to people we love, to the world, to our finances. It's a lot of threat. And so I thought I might start with one way to kind of begin to make a slight difference with anxiety. There are tons of breathing techniques and all kinds of things, but I picked a few that are pretty easy to do. And of course, the more you practice, the better you get. So as with everything, right? So if you're not feeling anxious right now, pick another feeling. This works with any feeling. It depends on the idea that feelings actually are things we conclude in our mind about things that are happening in our body. And so I'm going to ask you to focus on a feeling, whatever it is that happens to be up for you right now. You can close your eyes if it makes it easier to concentrate. And I'd like you to find one place in your body where you are feeling that. I'm noticing with myself, my chest is a little constricted, a little tight. And so that's where I'm holding my anxiety right now. And that also is my grief, both. And once you've located anywhere, and people who aren't used to doing this, it might be pretty subtle, like your finger feels a little bit twitchy, or it doesn't matter if it's big or little. Just find a place that you're feeling whatever it is you're feeling right now. And imagine in your mind that you have one mouth on your face and another mouth right where you've located that feeling. And just imagine that you're breathing in both those places at the same time. In the mouth where you're used to breathing, and in this other mouth you've identified in your body. Let's just take a short while to practice that. If it's hard for you to get a hold of that, no worries. You can start with the question, where am I feeling this? And maybe in a couple days, you'll You'll be able to identify that. What I like about that particular thing is it's simple. You can do it anywhere. Of course, we're mostly at home right now, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us. But you could do it anywhere. You could do it in line. You could do it. Let's say you go to the grocery store and your anxiety goes up. It would be a good one for that moment. Anything that I think the way that works is you don't force it to change. You haven't forced anything to change. You've allowed it to be true that you're feeling what you're feeling. And then it just puts a little more air in it. And so there's no force about it, which I think is part of how it works. I wanted to talk, did anyone notice any slight change doing that? Okay, great. If you didn't, no worries. It's just something to try. So in terms of feeling the feelings, I mentioned earlier, I think we're in a global grief event. What I mean by that is, of course, some people are having death loss, but everyone has lost the life they had a month ago. We all have. And I was on a support call with an organization called Reimagine the other day. They've been doing some meetups, and they did breakout groups. And one of the women was talking about, everyone was talking about how they're coping. And one woman said, I just started a business in grief and I'm really trying to focus. And I was thinking, no. Because to me, one of the primary things in a grieving time is that it's hard to focus, that it's very difficult to focus, and we have to give ourselves a little latitude if we can. One of my kids is now working from home. She supports she supports basically marginalized artists. And so when this happened, her work cranked up appreciably. That makes it harder. If your work has gotten more intense, it's harder to accept that you can't focus. But I just want to put behind this, it's not surprising that people are having a hard time with focus. I've noticed in myself, sometimes I just start crying and I don't know why. I'm a little more irritable. I don't tend to be a highly irritable person, and I'm a little bit flashpoint right now. It's hard to remember things. I showed up for an appointment yesterday an hour early. Fortunately, not an hour late, but that's an indication of how hard it is to focus. You might have feelings you're not used to having. For instance, I'm thinking of a client I had who's very good at making her life go the way she wants it to go. And so she doesn't encounter feelings of being totally out of control that often. But she's feeling that right now. So you might get surprised by your feelings. The bottom line with feelings is they come and they go. Many people actually have said, is it easier for you to go through grief because you're a grief counselor? No, it is not. But what is different is that I let it happen. I don't go through a long period of resistance because I know I can't get out of it anyway. So I may as well just do it. So that's different. But the grief itself, no, I just have to go through it. I've read several things lately about the need to highlight your compassionate voice right now. Of course, that would be great all the time, but it's more important now to have a contrary voice. If you're saying, why am I feeling so blank, blank, blank? You might say, on the other hand, this is a big deal. Or on the other hand, I really had a rough time with such and such. And that'll begin to develop that voice. The last thing I'll say about having feelings is that sometimes feelings are categorical, but they're not definitive. So, for instance, you're anxious. We could put it in the umbrella of COVID, but when I ask people, okay, what is actually scaring you? There's no uniform answer. Is it death? Is it illness? Is it someone dying you love? Is it being cooped up? Is it relationship troubles? There's not a rule about that. So ask the question a little deeper. Okay, I'm feeling this. What might it be about? And then see if you can go from the what if to the if then. If that actually does happen, it'll be terrible. And then the next day will come, and then the next day will come. I'll have to call on all my friends, whatever it might be. Anxiety loves the lack of an answer. So even if the answer is painful, it's usually better to know the answer and to start to deal with how you would handle whatever it is. That's a big subject, but I wanted to throw it in. You know, sometimes the example of that, I was at a workshop when my oldest, who's almost 40, was a baby, and the workshop leader said, I want you to go home and imagine that your child died. And I want you to go forward in time until you get to the day where you say, it will always hurt, but I can go on. And I had been a pretty anxious, you know, the kind of parent who goes and makes sure she's breathing and all that. It completely cured me of that. Isn't that counterintuitive? But it does make sense, because what's unknown is what really cooks us up. So anything that you want to ask or share, just put it in the chat. I wanted to present some things about feelings, but if you have anything you want to share with everyone, or you just want to chat me and ask a question, feel free throughout this. That's totally fine. There are so many ways of walking with ourselves through feelings, but I hope that gives you just a little bit that might give you permission for it, because no, I can't imagine anyone is having no feelings about what's happening. And then we all have particular feelings that come out of our experiences and what resiliencies we've already built and all of that. So I want to move on to finding solace and comfort, which of course is closely related to having grief, because grief is something we do alone, but it's also something we can't do without community. My favorite writer about that is Francis Weller, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. I was going to try to be high tech and share screen and all that. No, I didn't have that in me. So, but if you want that reference, he talks a lot about how there are certain aspects of grief that no one can be with you for, and certain aspects of grief that you can't be alone for. And that's why something like this to me is so important, because it allows us to connect. I don't like the term social distancing at all. I've been using physical distancing because we're being social. One of my friends, who actually is a resiliency trainer with medical professionals, so she is quite busy right now, trying to help that community. She likes the word lamentation. And I'm liking that word too. We need to lament. We need places that we can complain and be sad and be heard, and have people refrain from trying to help us. Uh, just listening is the biggest help. There's a great book about this, or one of the things it's about. It's called There's No Good Card for This. It's full of graphics. This is my favorite. What kind of non-listener are you? I've handed that page out to a bazillion people. It's things like the sage gives wise perspective and advice. The optimist always has the upside, et cetera, et cetera. And I think as people who need to be heard, we can cue the other person that we just need to be heard. And as listeners, because I think it's a mutual process, as listeners, we can refrain from helping when maybe someone just needs to unload. There are certain words that help, like if you say to someone, hey, can I have 5 minutes to just vent? Something about the word vent helps people cue in that they're not supposed to be doing anything. But of course, we live in a culture where we're always trying to do something. We're always trying to improve things. And so it takes a little, for some people, a little learning to realize, no, I don't have to change anything. I just have to be there. I think that's incredibly important in a moment like this, where there's a lot of what's going on that we have no control over. Someone just asked if I'll share these resources, and I will, but I won't be able to do it while I'm talking. So I'll send them at the end. So lamenting. Sometimes it's less than lamenting. Sometimes it's just saying, ugh, I hate this. I'm noticing that all of these things I'm talking about today are happening on social media, right? So I'm being very judicious about which thing I'm actually needing at the moment and avoiding the others, and maybe coming back to them later. Over time, I hit them all. But if I'm into, oh God, this is so terrible, a cheer up kind of post isn't going to help me. So that's just a parentheses about social media and how we can use it, because it's one of the places we can connect with others going through this. Another word that I like is commiseration. You know, all of these kinds of ideas of not trying to change anything, but definitely trying to accompany each other, let's say. Another book that came to my mind this morning as I was getting ready, it's called It's Okay to Laugh, Crying is Cool Too. This woman lost her husband when she was 32 and had a 1-year-old. And she's extremely humorous. And so she's kind of down and dirty with her, what she went through, not trying to get out of that at all. But the humor sometimes helps us open up to the difficult feelings. I'm noticing with all of the, you know, political aspects of what's happening, it's better for me if I listen to it pre-processed through a humorist. But you know, if I don't know, Trevor Noah or whoever, I can take it in better if there's a little bit of a humor aspect. Okay, so the third, one more word about social media. Sometimes you have to a little bit ignore comments. If you're sharing something painful or something you're struggling with, which can get you heard, then you kind of have to edit out the comments that don't go in the direction you need. So that's a caution, but I still think that it's been very interesting to watch as someone who works in the grief field, that people now share their losses on a social platform. And it's made people in my view, a little more comfortable with the human fact that we all grieve. So just a slight word. I think it's, you know, it's got its good and it's got its obviously not so good, but that is a use people are making of it right now. Okay, the third part of this little fourplex I've got going, finding inspiration. I tend to really gravitate towards this aspect of the four, but I have to be careful of, you know, if I'm really having a crappy day, and what I really need to do is just feel that way until I come out of it. Then if I try to go find inspiration, as I said earlier, it's probably going to backfire. But I think that it is a vital part of staying optimistic overall in a situation where you don't have much say so. You know, you've probably heard the Fred Rogers sing when his mother told him, if there's a bad time, look for the helpers. I think that has a lot of wisdom to it because, you know, when we're in kind of a hard spot and we don't see the way out of it, seeing that people are doing inspiring things. Of course, my whole show is based on this, right? that people have gone through very intense loss and something has come out of it that's beautiful. That's incredibly inspiring to me. That's why I do it. What inspires you might be very, very different. I've been extremely inspired by all of the artists, also very saddened because I know they're taking a hit on their finances right now, but so inspired that people are doing. Last night, Tammy Hall did a all-night music concert in her living room. You know, just played anything people asked her to play that she knew. Melanie DeMore has done that. Big names have done it too, but they can afford to do it. It's still beautiful, but the fact that less affluent musicians are sharing, and other types of artists too, I find that inspiring. So here's a few things I pulled, and I will copy these into the, if you give me just a second, I'll copy them into the chat. So you can go look later. Everyone, I'm not too fast at this stuff. Okay, so those of you who are in Oakland Interfaith may have seen already that the Mercury News put up some music for Easter, one of which was one of our performances. And when I listened to that, I started crying in a good way because it brought back us being scrunched up on bleachers together. It happened to be the song Bless This House, which just felt right in line with what we're going through, where what we really need is our houses to be blessed because most of us are in them a whole lot. It just did me so much good. So that's an example in these are all examples that have worked for me, and you're going to have to look for your own. There's a new video cast, I guess, that John Krasinski started called Some Good News that he's doing out of his office. And, you know, he's a pretty funny guy, so that helps with my sense of inspiration. But he's looking around for positive things that are happening. So, and the second show, he had a 9-year-old who was supposed to go to Hamilton and couldn't go, and he got the original cast of Hamilton to come on and sing a song for her. So things like that, where the beauty of being human to each other shows. I find that very inspiring. Pretty much most of the interviews on my show, I put a link to my show on here. There's, 300 and plus interviews there of people who are pretty inspiring because they've taken a very bad situation and moved forward from it. And that helps me anyhow. Let's see, I'm going to take a look at these. I'm going to take a look at these, make sure I haven't, somebody said, if it's hard to cry, play a song. I agree with that. All right, we have already come to the fourth aspect here, and then I'll talk some about how to put them all together. The fourth is take action. But it has to be action that feels resonant for us as a person. It's not just any action. It's action that helps us feel less helpless. One of my guilty pleasures is watching Project Runway, and the person who is mentoring on that show now is Christian Siriano. So I started following him on Instagram, just because he dresses a lot of different bodies, and I think that's cool. Anyway, he's completely converted his sewing room to mask making. In the last couple of days, I think they made 2,000 masks or something. They're just making masks and putting them out. They're not making any fashion right now. That inspires me, that somebody took something he has access to that other people don't and said, what can I do with this? How can I be helpful with this? This thing today for me gives back so much because it's something I know about and I can offer. And that is just the best. It feeds my own resiliency. Let's put it that way. People are delivering food. I have a client who's 70, her husband's 82. They are so self-reliant. They need no help usually. But they've decided they shouldn't go out. And so their neighbor said, we'll get your groceries. As long as it's going on, you don't have to worry about that. I find that inspiring that people just step up like that with each other. And people that maybe weren't all that close before. Maybe some of you can think of experiences in your own life where there's been a little bit of a step towards each other in this time. I also want to say a word about what the things that are actions that we don't always count as actions. I was noticing that a lot of my clients were saying, I'm so frustrated, there's nothing I can do. And what I realized is that if we're doing something, staying home, for instance, the action might be very subtle, but it's still an action. Not going out is an action that keeps ourselves and other people safe. And so I think we need to be very, we need to broaden our sense of what an action is. If that, and the other thing we need to do is realize that we are taking actions, that that we may be overwhelmed by the bigness of this, but meantime, most of us are doing something to get from one place to the next. Even things like when someone crosses my mind and I haven't heard from them, I'm trying to text them. That's a pretty small thing for me, but it would make a difference to them because I know it would make a difference the other way around. And it isn't a big effort, but it counts. So the ways that you have to connect just a little bit really do, I think, make a difference. Okay, so the last thing I really want to talk about is that, and then we'll kind of open it up if people want to share. I said before, it's a matter of really asking yourself what you need at a moment and hoping for some balance of these 4 areas over the course of, say, a week. If you look back over the past week, did you have some moments where you were deep in feeling, where you were just feeling a lot? Did you have some moments where you were getting comfort, getting and giving comfort? Did you have some moments where you felt inspired by something you were exposed to? And did you take some actions? Which, of course, I would say we all have, right? We've all taken actions. It's a matter not just of doing those things, but of registering that you did them, of really taking it to heart that you're trying your best to find some balance, and that you'll struggle more at some times than at other times. But we're kind of all doing the best we can. I truly do believe. I'm going to put my if I can find it here, I'm going to put my email address up on the chat. Feel free to reach out. And I wonder if anyone has anything about what I've shared, anything it spurred for you. If you do, maybe we should have hand raising, because it might get a little bit, people talking all at once doesn't seem to work on this platform. But if you've got something that you'd like to share, I'd love to. I'm sorry, but I'm not. Okay, go ahead, Laurel. If I can't see you,
Thank
though,
you.
just unmute and say you want to share something.
Yeah, I was chatting with a ministry colleague this week, and she said that she's learned that the 5th stage of grief is finding meaning. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, to me, that's this. Yes, I agree with that. And I think it naturally comes out of the experience. I think we're wired to do that. But lots of things get in the way of it, including kind of not being able to allow ourselves to grieve.
Mm.
I interviewed someone a couple of times who's, I don't know if she ever finished the book, but she was writing a book on grief, love, and generosity. And her principle was that when you really go through grief, when you allow it, when you follow yourself, when you learn to accompany yourself, a moment comes where you naturally want to give something. Mm. And to me, that's where the meaning comes in. you know, it comes sooner or later, depending on the person, but that's at the heart of my whole life, right? Pretty much everything I do came out of that loss experience, everything I do professionally. So I think that's a natural process. It might look different for different people. For instance, let's say you lose, your mother dies. You will probably be the person that gets called when someone's mother dies. And there's something very meaningful about having that support to offer.
Right.
So that's an example, right? It might not be some big in the world thing. It might just be the meaning that you've crafted. And that's part of that post-traumatic growth aspect. They've identified 5 areas that typically grow after trauma. And it's things like, I typically forget one, so I'll do my best here. It's not always the same one. Better relationships, a sense of being stronger, a sense of new possibility, spiritual deepening of some form. Yep, I've forgotten one, but you get the idea. All of those are meaning equations, aren't they? So I think that is natural, for sure. Also around the election, a couple of days later, I was in the car and I turned to my wife and I said, I wonder what the songs are going to be, right? Because I just assumed there was going to be new music that came out of that difficulty. And the very next day, I went to a Melanie DeMore concert, and she sang a new song. So that was immediate, right? She immediately made something from it. Some of us take longer. Does that contribute to
Yes,
your
thank you
question?
so much. Can you put those 5 things in your email that you're going to send out with the other resources?
I absolutely will. Let me make.
Thank you so much.
I don't even have a pen. That's ridiculous, but I won't forget. Yeah, John.
Hi, I came across this really beautiful list. It says 6 daily quarantine questions to ask yourself. What am I grateful for today? Number 2, who am I checking in on or connecting with today? 3 is, what experience of normal am I letting go of today? How am I getting outside today? How am I moving my body today? And what beauty am I either creating, cultivating, or inviting in today? That's really cool.
I like those lists, except in one way. Oops, I lost you, John.
Oh, it's okay.
I like those lists, except in one way, which is that in grief, sometimes you can't meet your own standards. And I like them as suggestions, but not as requirements. There are just some days I'm not going outside, for instance, right now.
Yeah, this was just,
But,
I think this is.
But having in the back of my mind, getting outside is a positive, you know, and might contribute to these areas of focus. I'm all for that. But I think it's just so crucial. If I had just said one thing and gotten off the call, it would be kind to ourselves. You know, it's a hard situation, and I think that's bottom line, probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I think this is just really geared more just for the what's going on with the virus that we're going through.
Yeah. So I can't see everyone at once, and some people do not have video up. So is there anyone else who would like to say anything? Just unmute, because I can't see who might want to share. So quiet.
This is Marin. I'll say something.
Hi, Marin.
I'm so glad, first of all, that you were willing to take the time and share this experience and expertise and knowledge and wisdom with us. It's so important for our community to come together in this way. And this is such a gift of offering that you're giving to us. So thank you for that. I want to acknowledge, I think, to share something personally, I think many of you know that I've had a lot of family medical issues and illness. So I walked my brother's cancer journey until he passed away in January. And my dad died 2 years ago. So from that perspective, I think I'd like to add to this conversation that I know we're all sharing in this grief and trauma that we're currently in, but many of us walked into it in other situations of trauma.
Yes.
And we are layering a staggering amount of stress on one another. And so I really echo that. Be kind to yourself. I love those kinds of idealists as well. And I also recognize that I have to look at them as inspiration, not as to-do lists, because my to-do list already feels overwhelming. And sometimes breathing is the first step. So I wanted to add to that, you know, many of you know my personal experience, but I also know that, you know, of the 30 or so people on this call, many of you entered this experience of trauma with other grief and trauma. And maybe talk a little bit about how we deal with those sort of multi-layer kind of situations.
Oh, that's a whole other 10 hours. And I will say,
Yeah.
I mean, this situation has found us all as we were before it. But what's really been, since I work in grief, since a lot of my clients are in active grief, to be to have some of the outlets that perhaps we usually have access to taken away, for some people just really increases the, you know, the glass is not just full, it's overflowing. And then other people that I've heard from are feeling like, good, I don't have to go out, I just get to do my grief. So it's very individual and unique. But I would say that I've noticed that a lot of people that I'm working with have actually gone back to things they experienced earlier. There's kind of a regressive quality. And that just makes complete sense because stress pushes us backwards. And so the thing to do is not to add a layer by saying, oh my God, I thought I was done with this part. No, I'll tell you that if I walk down the street, well, I don't do that right now, but when I still did that, if I was walking behind someone who walked just like my wife who died, it could still put me back in that place, right? I mean, we're wired like that. We have those things in us. And so I would think right now, things could get touched off. I've noticed certain news stories plunge me, even when they're not surprising, like the things that have come out in the last few days about the differential in marginalized communities. I mean, that just took me down, even though I knew I could have, you know, known that. So we're going to get set off by things, and all we can do is walk ourselves through it until we're kind of wobbling forward again. But I do think that's a lot when you're already deep in grief and then the whole world goes crazy. Does that is that what you were?
Yeah, thank you.
Susan.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much for doing this. It's great to see you on Zoom. So a couple of things. One, I posted something in the chat that I have found extraordinarily useful for myself in the last few weeks about this sort of pressure to be an overachiever during a pandemic. And it was written by a educational researcher who has spent, I don't know what kind of research they do, but spent lots of times in war zones and other epidemics, and has written from a place of experience in terms of what works and what doesn't work in these situations. And I also, just to echo what Maren said, I have found myself, my mom died, you know this, 10 weeks ago. And it feels like there hasn't been any space to really mourn that. She died on Whidbey Island, and the first case in the United States was in Everett, and it arrived just days after my family kind of went through that airport and gathered on Whidbey Island. And I was really looking forward to this time, which sounds insane, but just where I have to be locked in my house, which is about what it takes for me to just settle here. And what I found instead is converting all of I do community education for a hospice program. We've had to convert all of our educational programs online, which has taken so much more time, having to learn Zoom and do all of these things when I'm, really just hoping that I can retire and go off into the woods somewhere. But what I'm noticing most in the last couple of weeks is I was in San Francisco for the AIDS epidemic and had just arrived just before the AIDS epidemic. And my response in those days as a 20-year-old who was working in a lot of different fields, but I had a good part of my time was spent with gay men because we were catering, and the whole catering world was full of gay men in those days in San Francisco. And so I spent about 10 years with friends of mine dying all of the time. And my response was to turn towards that suffering, not initially, because I hid out for 3 years when my first friend got sick with cancer, but when AIDS happened to my friends that were my immediate circle, I just kind of ran towards that suffering with my arms like wide open, and to do whatever I could to support people. And now, as a 62-year-old with an autoimmune disease, I find a very different response, and I work in a hospice program. And so I've been talking with some colleagues. We're not currently taking active COVID-19 patients. And the moral distress of not being able to be of service to people, I kind of feel like after this, however our world looks once this is over, which I don't really see happening in the next 10 years. If our response to the AIDS epidemic was anything, it took 10 years for some meds that would keep people alive to come out. And so, in this new world that we'll re-enter, these groups of people who are, not able to respond to this epidemic or pandemic in the way that they had been able to respond to another. And then also the grief of people who are responding and seeing things that are just beyond anything they would ever have imagined seeing as a nurse or a doctor in the United States. So, I think it's maybe too early to really know what that kind of grief is looking like, but I just want to put that out there because there's so many, I think there's so many people in the healthcare profession and the helping professions that are really, staying at home and feeling, like this isn't enough to do. I have a weekly report that I have to send in to my manager every week. And it's like one of the parts I need to fill out is, for the next 2 weeks, what are your priorities around these goals? And I've just said for the last 3 weeks, my priority is number 1, to stay alive, and number 2, not to infect anybody with COVID-19. And I feel like anything above that is like icing on a big fat invisible cake. But really right now, our jobs are to stay alive and to try to keep people in our community alive. And I think anything more than that, we should give ourselves a big pat on the back. So just thank you for, this just being in this space reminds me like that's all that's really important right now.
I so agree, as you
Yeah.
well know. And I think we can take it lightly. Like you've just had a bunch of things thrown at you, some of which were probably very familiar, others maybe a little bit different. But just let them percolate on their own.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a time for effort. I really agree with the things that have come out about, unless you just can't help but do it, and that does happen sometimes, it's not the time to write your novel. It's not the time, let's not put added pressure on an already pressured situation. Now, on the other hand, I've known people who say their wife died and they had to write, if that's what's happening for you, go ahead. But if you're putting some pressure, like I should be taking advantage of this time, I think that's just counterproductive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything they would like to say? Well, I've really appreciated being able to offer this. I hope it was of use to people, and I hope we have other ways to keep taking care of each other, because to me that's what it's all about.
So Sharon has her hand up. Somebody's saying, Cheryl?
Oh, does somebody have their hand up? Who's got their hand up? Just unmute and talk, because I'm not seeing
There she
it.
goes. Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in the midst of this, I'm also finding myself, and I've changed what I used to call it pre-grieving, but after listening to this, it's like maybe I'm not pre-grieving, I'm just grieving. But I've tried to prepare myself so that I am not being naive, because my mom lives in an assisted living facility. I'm trying to prepare myself for her passing in a way actively that I haven't done in the past. And it's really, wow.
Yeah.
It's like, whew.
I'm glad you said that, because one thing that has come up a lot for people that I'm talking with is basic death fear, either of losing someone you love or your own. And some of us, like Susan and I, were very immersed in the death world. Doesn't mean we can't get afraid, but and she does death cafes, for instance, right? Where you come together and talk about death. I do a lot of end of life work. So, that's, I think we're all being pushed in that direction that you're talking about, to come to terms with those things, however we're doing that, because otherwise we'll just be in anxiety,
Right.
which is going to happen sometimes,
Yeah.
of course.